hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for November 16, 2017. Joining us today to talk about the Rochester Rhinos' demise and other topics in the world of football, Michael Lewis at Soccer Writer, writes for Front Row Soccer. Michael, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you people? How are you guys?
Good. Getting cold up here, but pretty good. Michael, Kevin said demise off the top because I think that's what we all fear. Of course, Rhinos coming out yesterday, and I hate to say begging, but basically saying that if they didn't raise $1.3 million, things were pretty much not going to continue on, for those that don't know. Let's start with this. Let's just start with a little bit of positive. Just talk about what the Rhinos have meant for the American, or have meant for American soccer, what sort of role they played in the American soccer landscape over the past 20 years or so ago.
Well, they've been, up until maybe recent years, one of the most stable franchises. They came on very strong. They're sort of like the son or grandson of the old Rochester Lancers, reviving professional soccer in Rochester. And actually, early on, they played pretty even with many MLS teams in the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup, winning it in 1999 as the last non-MLS team to actually capture that championship. So for many years, they were, let's say, the top of the second division minor league soccer, whatever you want to call it. Unfortunately, and maybe ironically, after they got their own stadium, they had played at Frontier Field, a baseball stadium, a baseball park in Rochester. By the way, great ambiance. I've been up there for soccer games, and even though it's in a baseball park, it's still fantastic atmosphere. But after they got their own stadium, which many people claim was in a bad neighborhood, might have stopped them from seeing games. Parking was sketchy, at least that's what people said. And even though the team had been competitive, they've reached the playoffs in 21 of 22 years, which is a damn good record. I don't care what level of soccer you're playing at. The attendance has eroded over the last several years. It's from my perspective, I started my professional writing career in Rochester. I covered the Rochester Lancers. I covered the demise of the team. I hated doing it, although that was my job. I think a part of me died at the time. And even though I am 350 miles and 37 years away from what transpired with the Lancers, a part of me is dying seeing a soccer team in trouble like that. And, it's not just Rochester. I want to see soccer teams thrive no matter what level and have a history like you see in England. Sheffield Wednesday has been around for forever, it seems, but you want to see history of teams saying we've been around for 50 years, 100 years, and to see a team like that die in a vibrant soccer community for a so-called small city, medium city, whatever you want to call Rochester. They have a very strong soccer history and environment.
As someone who spent way too much time on those big soccer message boards back in the late 90s, early 2000s, Rochester was a name that would often come up as a potential MLS target back then. Was that ever a realistic target for them, or is maybe that sort of thinking what kind of started them down the road to get into trouble by building that stadium, by losing what they were a little bit?
It might have started them down that road. I mean, they wanted to be, let's put it this way, the Lancers liked being the Green Bay of the North American Soccer League back then. They were among the smallest cities, and yet they were competitive, particularly at home. And they managed to get into the playoffs a couple times near the end of their 14-year history. But that was just, they were just barely holding on there. Back then, back when the Rhinos started in 1996, the same year MLS started, they got off on the same footing in many ways with other MLS sides. And I think the excitement of having a pro team there and people realizing how much they missed having a pro team there for 16 years, which could seem like centuries, I think spurred them on. They got some fantastic crowds, again, at Frontier Field, and I think it got them thinking that, yes, we could have an MLS franchise being a Green Bay or the Green Bay Packers of Major League Soccer. But unfortunately, attendance just, did not hold up at the new park. I mean, to be considered for Major League Soccer, obviously, I guess they would prefer the league would prefer a team to have its own Soccer Pacific Stadium, and Capelli Sports Stadium is a solid facility, but the problem is they were not getting the crowds to really turn things around. Let's say, trying to look for the right words, to get Major League Soccer interested in them in an expansion franchise. And yes, it was, I think, unfortunately, you look back at it, it could be considered the beginning of the end.
Michael, when you're looking at the $1.3 million that we're talking about, that money would be used to help with some renovation costs, help with standards, up to standards measures, to make sure that the Rhinos would comply with USSF's demand that USL in Division II attains the level with no restriction, and especially no, it's my turn for looking for the right words, like exceptions for 2018. USL wants all their teams to comply with USSF's Division II standards and no restrictions, no easy pass for next year. So would that money be needed for the Rhinos to attain that level of a franchise? What are the odds that we see the Rhinos next spring?
Oh, wow. They've got 2 weeks to pull that off. And who knows, maybe they could extend it for a few days, but it at the moment, it just does not look very good. Maybe someone will come aboard with jersey money. That might be the easiest part of it. Season ticket holders getting $2,500. It's a tough task, but not impossible. The most difficult mountain to climb in all of this, I think, will be the money that they need from the local hotel tax, because Monroe County came out with a statement after the press conference yesterday saying the reason why the Rochester Red Wings and Frontier Field receive that money is because Frontier Field is run by the county. So that's going to be I think the most difficult part. Now, can that be offset with other money from more sponsorships, more season tickets? Yes. I would like to think, and this is just my gut feeling, I would like to think that David and Wendy Dworkins, the co-owners of the team, if they got $1 million or $1.2 million, that would maybe be enough for the team to go forward for 2018. But again, it just does not look very good. 15 days is not a long time to pull all this off. But I think if they get close, I would like to think they would say, okay, we're going to move ahead to 2018. I guess we'll have to wait until November 30th or December 1st to see what really transpires.
What does it mean for after 2018? And that's where it becomes important. It's all well and good to try to save the operations for 1 year, but it has to be able to sustain the test of time. Can the Rhinos survive past 2018?
Yeah, another good question. I think you've got to keep the momentum going. You've got to bring in crowds. You've got to not just be satisfied with 2,500 season ticket holders. You want to expand that base. You want to make it 3,000, 4,000. It kind of boggles my mind that they don't have that many season ticket holders already. I've heard all sorts of reports about some games there have been less than 1,000 people, and which, even during the dark days of the Rochester Lancers, they were still getting 6, 7, 8,000 people at their games. But it's a momentum factor, and I think it's sort of like the old Ed Sullivan show, the guy that's spinning all those plates. They're going to have to continue to spin those plates next year. But if they can get things going and not sit on their laurels and continue to look for sponsorships, whether it's from Rochester or outside the city, I think that's what's going to keep them alive. But I guess right now they want to take it one step at a time and just get to 2018.
Fair enough. And just in a general sense, so I want to move it away from Rochester specifically now. There's a lot of turmoil within North American soccer right now in terms of the NASL situation. We have the Rochester moving. We have FC Kansas City potentially moving to Salt Lake City. There's just Columbus, obviously that's in the mix too. Does all of this turmoil say something about the state of the game? Tie that into the U.S. missing the World Cup as well, if you wish, or is this just circumstance right now?
Maybe a little of each. I've never seen such turmoil after a season like this in a long time. I'm trying to remember the last time we had so many things happening on different fronts. And the teams and leagues that you mentioned, that's 4 different leagues we're talking about. It's not just one league. I think some of it might be circumstance. Moving FC Kansas City to Salt Lake City, I don't think that has anything to do with the U.S. Not reaching the World Cup, since that's a women's team. However, the NASL versus USSF situation, I'm not saying it's directly related, but I just think that it seems it has opened the door for people to dissent out there, and I think I just hope. Again, I don't want to see any. I hate to see any team go under. And the San Francisco Deltas went under after their first year. I would hate to see the NASL go under, just because that means as many as 7 other teams might be out of business unless they switch to the USL. And that's just not a good thing for soccer. But I think it's a combination of both.
All right, let's turn our attention to a club that's close to you, or clubs that are close to you in Major League Soccer to close out the interview. I'm curious, a week or so out from the Red Bulls elimination 2-2 in aggregate against TFC, the top team in the league, what the perception is of New York's season overall right now. Obviously, they came, one bounce away, one Alex Bono save away in that second leg from pulling the major upset. That said, it's another year without MLS Cup for a club that has come so close so many times and not been able to go over that hump. But what is the perception of the Red Bull season a week or so after it's been finished?
Well, Jesse Marsh, the head coach, said the team had a successful season. I would disagree. I don't think the team played well or consistently enough during the regular season to say it was successful, compared to recent years where the team either won the conference, won the Supporter Shield, or went at least to the conference finals. Team was an inconsistent team. They have some interesting parts to it, interesting players, but there was something missing. And I really think, I hate to harken back to something that happened 10 months ago, but the trade of Dax McCarty, I think, cut out the heart of the team early on, and it took a long time for the team to find itself again. They have some, promising young players in Aaron Young, Tyler Adams, who made his international debut the other day, Sean Davis, and again, some interesting and talented parts to go along with Bradley Wright Phillips and Sasha Kaleshin and Felipe in the midfield, but just they never really clicked. So to me, this was an unsuccessful season. It was not successful at all. I think what Marsh said was probably coach spin more than anything else. I think he wanted to make himself look good, but definitely a disappointing season.
In closing, Michael, I want to address the situation of the Cosmos for a second. Lost in the Soccer Bowl last Sunday to the now maybe probably non-existent, depends. There's maybe a scenario out there that sees the Delta surviving that was talked yesterday on social media. It's still undergoing the process right now. It's still up in the air if the Deltas will be back. But the Cosmos, they were in the final. They lost. What is the future of the Cosmos? What is it directly related if the NSL has found a way to survive, the Cosmos will be there? Or is the Cosmos looking for other opportunities? And do they have any other choice?
Well, right now, I think if the NASL does survive, and I know there has been talk on the social media that there's some talks, unofficial talks between the NASL and USSF to keep the team keep the league at Division II status for 2018. My sources haven't come through yet with to verify that, but if there is an NASL, the Cosmos will be around, no doubt about it. Now, if they don't get that Division II sanctioning, yeah, that's a big question. But Rocco Camiso, the owner of the team, seems very committed to keep this team afloat. Would not be surprised, and again, this is just me talking, not through sources or anything else, but I would not be surprised. Let's say they can't get that Division II sanctioning, but they come back as a Division III league, and maybe they say something like, well, they say we're Division III, but we're going to have Division II standards. and that would be the only thing that I think would keep the league and the team going for 2018. I know that sounds crazy because you don't have the sanctioning, but I really think Camiso wants to continue the Cosmos and the league any way he can. I guess we're going to have to wait and see until December for that ruling.
Michael, what's going on Front Row Soccer the last few days?
Wow. Covering the events that you just mentioned. It's been, it's funny, we're in, let's say, quote unquote, the off season now. NYCFC, the Red Bulls have been eliminated from the MLS playoffs. Obviously, the Cosmos were lost in Soccer Bowl this past Sunday. Yet, we're getting more hits than we did in the regular season. And I think part of the reason is because there's so much news happening. I have never seen so much news happening on a day-to-day basis in soccer in general. Usually you might get one big story a day. Now it's 2 or 3 big stories a day, whether it's a league in trouble, a league going to court, a franchise in trouble. Last night, for example, I was ready to shut down, and I found out that a referee, a longtime North American Soccer League and Major Indoor Soccer League referee, Bill Maxwell, had passed away, someone I knew during my early years as a soccer writer. And I had actually covered him back then, a very personable referee in person. And I went and did a big obituary about him. And, you know, just so many things are just happening at once. Again, I've never seen anything like this. And I've been around the block. And usually the off season, and I know the MLS playoffs will continue next week. But I've, again, never seen anything like this in the off season, which I guess is good and bad. But yeah, like I said, I was ready to shut down, and it's kind of turned into a 24/7 situation. You just don't know what's going to happen next.
Michael, thank you very much for your time today. You can follow Michael on Twitter at SoccerWriter. We'll be right back after the break.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at Soccer Today SPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, we're talking about turmoil. We're talking about things happening. More things are happening as we speak live, and that's the beauty of live podcasting and radio. North Carolina FC is leaving the NASL to join the USL, the worst kept secret in USL over the last few weeks. It's now official. Duane.
I apologize for that. Neil Morris, of course, the reporter that broke that news just about 10 minutes ago. Yeah, well-known secret, as we said. As Kevin just said there a minute ago, we all knew this was happening, but it has just been confirmed as we record this at 10:24 a.m. Eastern Standard Time when we're live right now. And if you're listening to this on demand, you may not realize that you can listen to us live every day at 10 a.m. on our social media or on our YouTube page and on sportspodcastingnetwork.com. So
in HD, actually, too. HD sound, HD video, so you can see literally every little thing that's going on my face in HD at the same time. That's pretty much maybe too much information, but you can see it.
Exactly. So if you didn't know that, then now you do. You can tune in and listen live, and you participate with us through social media and so forth. We used to have calls, but we didn't have enough calls to make that worth our time.
Well,
but
we used to have a call. Like we had someone call. I don't know if I would use the plural. Maybe eventually, if the demand is there, we have the capabilities. We can open the lines for you folks.
Exactly. All right. But if you want to listen to us live, you can do so. And you can watch Kevin, too. I'm not quite ready to go there yet. I'm sitting here in my track pants and
there's an image of you. Like, there's a nice picture of you with your Manchester City banana. That kind of fits you. It's you.
Yeah. For those that, people are looking at that banana photo, we won't belabor this because not everyone can see it, but there is a photo of me hugging a banana that is accompanying my appearances here now. It is me immediately caught in a very candid moment. I am not posing for that picture after Manchester City was being eliminated from the Champions League 2 years ago. So there you go. That's the story of that photo if you don't know.
Oh, so that's where the sadness comes from.
There you go. Yes, I was hugging the Manchester, and I'm looking at that banana right now. It is in my studio, quote unquote, right to my right, up on the top of on a little platform there. Anyway, North Carolina. There's not much to say about it beyond that. That's why we're completely getting distracted here because we knew it was happening, but it does certainly speak to the overall turmoil that Michael spoke to in that. But to get back to Rochester before we maybe segue out and continue our discussion from yesterday that Kevin ended the show with. It would be a real shame to lose them. It's a real shame to lose any team. You don't want to see the Deltas leave, and they've only been there for 1 year. But a name like the Rhinos, which have been around since the 90s, as I said to Michael, when I was first I wasn't writing or talking about the game, but I was certainly reading a lot about the North American game, learning a lot about the domestic game, the domestic club game in the late 90s, early 2000s, back on Big Soccer and on other boards like that. And the Rhinos were just front and center. They were massive. They were as big as any MLS team back then. And to see them at this state, it just makes me kind of sad. And, again, I don't want any team to go. I don't want any team to fold. But I especially don't want the Rhinos to go or the Rhinos to fold because that would just be a real tragedy. And it sort of would, just when you think that the game is stabilizing, this stuff rears up and it makes you go, maybe it is not as stable as we think. And, those on the other side of the pro-rel argument will argue if that was there, then maybe that would have made a difference. I think that stability would make things worse. Instability would make things worse, as I've said many times before. But certainly the closed pyramid folks will be rallying around the Rhinos' demise if that does in fact happen, Kevin.
Yeah, it would be a sad situation. Just to remind our listener, Bob Lilly, who was the head coach of the Rhinos for the last few years, a former Montreal Impact head coach, a famous second and third division head coach in North American soccer, has left the Rhinos because of the situation as well, and has accepted a job with the Riverhounds in Pittsburgh. And you have the creation of FC Penn yesterday, which is basically the rebranding and relocation of the Harrisburg City Islanders. And you have a new entity there in the capital of Pennsylvania. So a lot of turmoil in the USL, a lot of turmoil in North American soccer, like Michael Lewis were saying. I finished the show yesterday, Duane, by mentioning the Montreal Impact not having anything in return of was Oyongo. Oyongo signed for Montpellier, and I think it's a missed opportunity for a young, highly touted prospect and one of the best players of the Montreal Impact over the last few years. Clearly the big piece in that Felipe trade, it was basically Felipe for Oyongo. When you think about it, Eric Alexander is long gone, and he wasn't the reasoning and wasn't the piece behind this trade. So Ambroise Oyongo, a left back with qualities that is hard to find in North American soccer, the Montreal Impact let him go for nothing.
Yeah, and Kevin and I, we should have had an extended show yesterday. We had a good discussion about this after we pulled the plug on the show. I sort of suggested at that time, and I'll repeat myself now, that it sort of speaks to the North American mindset around sports that they aren't able to wrap their head around. The Impact weren't able to wrap their head around. It's not just the Impact to make this error either. The idea that you have to make very cold, calculated decisions about your assets before you lose them for nothing. Now, you see that in any North American sport. You hear about trading players away, rentals, quote unquote. It's a little different in this sport because you're selling them, and you're selling them for nothing that is tangible other than money. And your fans are going to rise up and go, well, we didn't get anything back for them, because you can't point to anything other than a pile of cash and say, trust us. And that's something that's difficult, I think, for North American owners to really wrap their head around, as I said. And especially, I think this is doubling down in the Impact's perspective, that they held on to him for the year because they felt that he was a valuable player to a team that they felt, I believe, Kevin, I think you probably agree with this, they felt had the chance to maybe finish and take that final step that they weren't able to get through last year and make an MLS Cup final. In hindsight, we now know maybe they weren't quite there yet, and that speaks to a failure to properly evaluate what your chances are. I'll let you jump in there. I have some more thoughts that I'll continue on, but let's get your perspective first.
Once you get to that 6 months period where he's allowed to hear other people talk and then not necessarily re-sign and can decide to, I'll just leave on a free transfer in a few months, it does give some value to a player for different type of clubs. Yes, some clubs will be really willing to pay for a transfer fee and to get you. Some of the clubs that are not necessarily wanting you for that much will agree to get you on board if you're on a free transfer. And yes, Oyongo is going to a bigger league. He's going to League R, one of the top 5 in England, in Europe. But the French league is not necessarily an easy place, and for Oyongo, just to get playing time is going to be difficult. He has a well-established left back in front of him. He will have to overcome a lack of playing time, and when he gets his opportunity, he's going to need to prove himself. So it's not going to be easy. It's a challenge. He goes into a situation where it's a francophone situation for him from Cameroon. Yeah, I think. I believe so. So, from the Cameroon. So for the Cameroon player that does play internationally for his country, and he's getting closer to home, going to a bigger stage, and having the opportunity with a flamboyant personality that I've always loved to talk to, he has a possibility of becoming a star in France if everything works correctly. If he gets his opportunity, if he's able to shine, and if he's able to have the right interviews with the right people that makes his personality shine through that TV, he has that it factor. He has that fun aspect that we love about athletes, and the dancing aspect. All the little things that we saw from Oyongo could be really useful for him in France. But still, we're talking about a sporting project that will be very difficult, and you're looking at the Montreal Impact, and now has to find a solution to replace one of their best players on the roster and not gaining anything from it. And that's where I think it hurts really much for the next few years. When you have a few bad decisions financially, like Aregi, like Boldor and company in the last 12 months, and you don't get anything out of a Oyongo leaving, it's like a double whammy. You're talking about a lot of money that Adam Braz and company and the Nick DeSantis and Joey Saputo, especially, it's his money, is left on the table.
Yeah. Look, couple things. Fiongo, I think obviously this is the right decision for him. He's at the right age to take a chance at this. Ligue 1 is obviously a higher stage than MLS. International aspirations I suspect to maybe play in a Champions League one day. All of those things, you can't blame him for making this move, and it's a move that any of us probably would make in the same situation. Where you can lie blame, I think, is how Montreal handled the situation and whether or not it was the right decision to hold on to him, knowing full well that they were going to lose him for nothing at the end of it. And look, even once you get past that 6 months, there's still, because they control his rights in MLS, they still would have sort of an asset that's sitting there that they could have maybe traded once it became clear that Montreal's season was going off the rails. And
let's be fair,
he was the other way that you could have thought about this.
Just one thing though, we need to be fair. He got injured like 7 months ago with a pretty bad injury, so it did change probably how the Impact wanted to live with the situation. Maybe they were shopping him, and maybe he was like in the window, and then his injury, so you can't really trade him, you can't really sell him. And that does change things, and then you up the timing, and like there's nothing you could do. But it's a gamble that was maybe like 10 months ago when they didn't renegotiate. That actually really turned into a bad gamble when the injury occurred.
Well, and look, and this is the type of player that I believe MLS, this is a tough slug for them. They'd like to keep some of these guys. Now, if he had an American passport, I'm sure that there would be a greater effort to keep him around, and that's just the reality of it, because MLS wants and values their American players, and I'm not casting blame or judgment on that. That's just truth. They do, because he's Cameroonian, because he played for a Canadian team. That's not going to get the same headlines as it would be if it was a young American that was mulling over that kind of move. But I think this is precisely the kind of player that MLS would ideally like to keep around, and why that they've added some money into the pie. So, is he a player that deserved to take up more of Montreal's budget? Have other decisions Montreal made in the past prevented them from allowing them to have him take up a bigger cut of that pie? And then it finally gets down to whether or not it's the right decision for the player himself. And if you have conversations with this player, say 16 months ago, and say, look, we'd like to keep you around, and we're willing to pay you the type of money that you'll make in Europe, which, let's face it, he will make more money even as a backup in Ligue 1 than he would of in MLS next year, unless Montreal really extended that contract to a significant amount that would have put him at the top end of their salary cap. Then, if he says no to that, I really like to go to Europe, then you have to make a choice. We need Impact. You have to decide whether or not you want anything from him, and if you decide that you don't, then really what you're doing is you're putting all your eggs in the basket of the next year, and you have to be damn sure that you know your evaluation, because I think that this league is increasingly going to become more like, well, it's going to be even more vital than other leagues in the world, because you have such a narrow sort of window with your money. You're going to have to get those decisions right, because if you don't, you could be in a big trouble, because you can't replace his talent with the money that they were spending, and it's going to leave a big hole in that roster next year. And had they made that decision, that tough decision 16 months ago to maybe move him earlier than they would have otherwise, he gets a chance to start to establish himself earlier. So that makes the player happy, and that's going to trickle down, and people are going to be other players are going to be aware of that. And the team gets enough money back and enough time to shop that they're not sort of desperately making a signing to fill a hole that's, gaping. They have lots of time then, and lots of control over how they're filling that hole. But it's a tough decision, because what would the Impact fans have said had they sold him last January? Yeah. They would have we just went to the Eastern Conference Final. What are you doing? Why are you selling one of our best players? That's the stuff that would have been heard, because fans just don't think that way in North America.
It's true. And then you have to explain, well, yes, he is valuable, and that's kind of the reason why we sold him, is because he has value. We'll get more out of him than anyone else that we sell, and we can get maybe more value, 2-3 more players with one TAM, one GAM, and some pick and Telegram. I don't know. But with the money you would have made from a Nyong'o transfer, Nyong'o sale, you could have made your club better in the future. And that's kind of like what it's all about. Sacrificing maybe one present asset for future assets. Maybe sometimes that's the way to go, but we'll never know. One thing that we do know, Duane, is the Montreal Impact a few days ago signed 2 more academy players. James Pentemis, goalkeeper, has signed his first professional contract from the academy, and same for Thomas Meyer-Giguère. The 18-year-old, turning very soon 19, has been loaned to Ottawa this season, has played there. He's from the academy of the Montreal Impact and has signed as well his first professional contract. So for Pantemis, yes, he's going to be the third goalkeeper. With the return of Evan Bush with the Montreal Impact and the presence of Maxime Crépeau, those two will battle for the first goalkeeper position, and James Pantemis becomes the first one in the antechamber of MLS timing.
Yeah, I'll be very curious to see how that Fury Impact relationship looks next year with the coaching changes and the change in direction for the Fury. Late in the season last year, we really didn't have an opportunity to see what the Fury would look like under potentially a Julian de Guzman role or a new coach if they bring someone in. The Fury do have an announcement coming this week. It could have to do with the future of the coaching staff. We're not too sure yet. Although it's not going to be DeSantos, guys. Let's get that out of our head.
I know. Some fans are still hoping, looking at you, Stuart. But if I were from Ottawa, and I was an Ottawa fan, I would like the prodigal son to come back too.
Well, no, who wouldn't? And I'm not a hardcore Ottawa fan, but I am looking at an Ottawa Fury scarf on my wall, just 10 feet from me right now. So it's not that I don't have a soft spot for the club, but nonetheless, I don't think it's much likely that DeSantos, based on what he said, I don't think it's the Fury he's talking about. At any rate, moving past that for a second, we've talked a lot about Mark DeSantos in the last few days, and we'll probably talk about him more at the end of the week when we find out exactly what's going on. Look, yeah, as I said, I'm going to be curious to see whether the Impact's young players get more of a run out next year. I know that that's not necessarily something that Fury fans are excited about, but I think. And it's tough for me to sort of evaluate because I want to see these young Impact players play more. This is why I'm still not overly happy with FC Montreal going away in any way whatsoever. And I say by not overly happy, I mean I'm still not happy at all about that. But nonetheless, here we are. So we'll be curious to see. And another keeper there, will Crépeau get enough minutes? Yeah. What are you going to do with Crépeau at some point? I think you have to make a decision about whether you want to loan him somewhere at one point. And maybe that's just it. If this young kid can prove that he's a capable enough backup, maybe then you can loan Crépeau out somewhere for the year, knowing full well or being confident that you have a backup that would work. That could be something that they're trying to do, but maybe I'm. Or
are you trying to split the work a little bit more evenly? Maybe you try to test out Crépeau a little more, and if one of them goes on a run, then it's the other one to steal the job. Maybe that competition side, maybe that's what Rémi Garde wants for his team too. That's something that wasn't the case for the Montreal Impact the last few years, is competition to just get onto the sides. So now, with the new head coach and the new coaching staff that will take place, and we haven't talked about the goalkeeping coach doing. The goalkeeping coach, Joel Batz, who's coming from France, from Lyon, he's the one who developed Loris. He developed like other great goalkeepers in French soccer that are playing right now in the highest levels of the game. And this man is leaving Lyon to come coach in Montreal with Rémi Garde, his friend. So, yeah, it's top-level coaching that we're talking about. We talked about the value, and we've talked about this even before Joey Saputo talked about it, that in a league with a salary cap where you have value and where you can actually get more bang for your buck compared to the other team that doesn't have the same amount of budget that you do, is outside of the pitch. It's coaches, it's training infrastructures. And Montreal is finally taking advantage of it with Rémi Garde and company. And I think it's going to raise the level of everything. And I think for James Pantemis and for Maxime Crépeau, working, no offense to Jack Stern and Youssef Daha, who did the same job before. I had the pleasure to talk to Jack Stern a few times for long periods of time, and is an amazing man with amazing vision and love.
This show was a great. If you look in our archives, you can find a great interview with him in this show. But anyway, continue, Kevin.
Exactly, like a great interview and a great man with a great vision, great passion for the sport. Has nothing to do with him at all. We're just talking about a different system, different view, and a different experience level. Like, no offense to Jack, he's amazing, but he's still young compared to Joel Batz, who's been doing this for almost 30 years.
Yeah, look, and Crépeau is. We talk about Maxime Crépeau a lot, and I am someone I focus on a lot in terms of what his future is, and maybe
because he's the future of our national team in net, pretty much.
But he has to play. and
True.
his club future. Yeah, and it's Evan Bush an asset that this is my hope with the new coaching staff there, that they're Europeans really more than North Americans in many ways do, I think, subscribe, and I'm stereotyping a bit here, but I do think that history bears this out, that they do subscribe to the, good enough, old enough sort of theory of playing. So if he proves that he's a more capable or as capable a keeper as Evan Bush, then maybe they look at Bush as an asset that they can move for some piece elsewhere in that league. Now, then they're getting a little thin on the keeping side because who's the backup? But that's a question for after the fact. So that's going to be an interesting question. There's going to be a lot of interesting questions with the Impact in this offseason in training camp. I can't believe I'm already thinking about training camp now. It's not even the end of the season yet, but that's going to be a very intriguing sort of.
Let's start with the expansion draft.
We're only 2 months away from the next season.
Well,
right?
Let's not forget, Duane, not only that, all the roster moves that are seeing now, people saying like Evan Bush returning. Yeah, but what if the Impact doesn't protect him on December 12th? And LAFC decides, well, we want a goalkeeper. Evan Bush has some experience and he's available. Then maybe Evan Bush goes to LAFC. And maybe this whole conversation is a moot point because Maxime Crépeau becomes number one like that. I wouldn't be surprised. Right?
Yeah, and that's something I thought of too. They could be holding Bush out to LAFC as a, as you make some kind of behind the scenes deal.
Take him. Don't take Donadell. Take him. Don't take Donadell.
Yes, exactly. I can't imagine Donadell anywhere other than Montreal.
Can you imagine
the Impact at this point? Although then that said, I couldn't imagine Felipe anywhere but Montreal until he was somewhere else. So
until he was in New York, and now I can't imagine him anywhere but with New York.
Yeah, well, Felipe is going to, I think that if you did a survey of TFC fans of the most hated player that they've ever faced, it would be Felipe. In a
TFC fans? I think you can go as far as MLS fans at this point.
Yeah, well, especially TFC fans, though, because...
from the time with Montreal to New York, yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's just been a pain from day one in the TFC, and he's played TFC in a lot of games over the years.
Canadian Championships, MLS, CONCACAF Champions League, yeah, I know.
Domodoro is the other player that, we've done that tracking before. Our friend Martin that works for Opta that gives us the stats that Adoro is the player that has played against TFC more than any other player. So I have to go back and look at his numbers to see how many Felipe Poe shows up in there. But I
remember seasons where Dominic Adoro was traded mid-season. He already played like his full complement of game against Toronto, and he gets traded. And he gets to play against Toronto again.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there was a season he played like 5 games against TFC or something. So, yeah. And then, of course, he played for TFC to make it even funnier. But there you go.
Yeah, all right. Played like for half the league, but that's something else.
Yes, exactly. Domodoro, how you doing, buddy? All right.
Freaky fast and give me some pizza.
Yeah, pizza. Speaking of pizza, I could do some pizza right now.
It's kind of
all right,
early
Kevin.
Or late.
I'm going to say goodbye. Why don't you say goodbye to the show?
Cool. We're going to talk about more the Columbus situation tomorrow. There was one thing left on the agenda today. There was Columbus meetings, and apparently it's not going well, and apparently people are not saying the right things truly. And, well, we're not shocked. We'll know more tomorrow on Soccer Today. And we'll talk about playoffs. Yes, playoffs tomorrow on Soccer Today as well. And until then, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, and until tomorrow, as always, we thank Michael Lewis for his time today at Soccer Writer, writing for Front Row Soccer, and have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.